All right, keys to victory and who needs to execute said keys. Number one, discussed this on Wednesday. I'm sticking with it. Slow down Tyler Warren and force Drew Aller to throw the ball to the perimeter. I have not seen them do that consistently this season. I like Oregon's corners. We'll see if Jaleel Florence plays. He did not against Washington, but I think I'm in agreement with all of you in saying Nico Reed has played well this year. Dante Manning's having a solid season. And Jabbar Muhammad is, I think, near the top of the Big Ten in pass breakups this year. So you've got to trust those guys and say, look, if you're going to throw the ball, Drew Aller, it's not going to be to number 44. I don't know what that game plan looks like. I do know who would have to execute no matter how Tosh Lupoy, Dan Lanning, and company decide, hey, we want to slow down number 44 in the blue and white. Number one guy that pops into my mind, Tysheem Johnson. Tysheem Johnson, you could see Kobe Savage get matched up onto him as well. I think they've, interchanged Savage and Tysheem on the back end. You traditionally think, oh, you got a free safety, strong safety. Both guys have played down in the box. Both guys have played over the top this season as well. And I think Oregon's, knock on wood, mostly done a good job of keeping explosive passing plays out of the repertoire for opposing offenses and made them work the middle of the field and take underneath routes. And that's a credit to the safeties, the defensive or the corners as well. But the safeties have not been a liability in coverage so far. But matching up with tight ends, you go back to the Ohio State game, you go back to the Michigan game, it's usually Tysheem Johnson and Kobe Savage. I'd put Brandon Johnson in here, but he's matching up with wideouts, and I think that's probably going to continue. So if you want to keep Tyler Warren, and keeping him in check, by the way, is anything under 5 receptions or fewer, 70 yards or fewer. If he's not accounting for 100 or 150 yards of total offense, because they'll snap it to him sometimes, he could have a passing play in this game. He'll run the ball in the red zone in particular. They do all sorts of things with him. If you're able to keep him under 70 yards receiving and not allow him to rack up 8, 9, 10 receptions, I think that's doing a good job, because you're not going to hold him to 0 catches. If Oregon does that, that would be a remarkable defensive feat, and you'd essentially have to double him on every play. I don't think they're going to do that. But Tysheem Johnson, maybe Kobe Savage, and the linebackers will come into play as well. Again, depends on what kind of coverage you're calling on a particular play. Sometimes Bryce Betcher might get matched up with him, or Jeff Bossa might get. Bossa tends to play more around the line of scrimmage, spying quarterbacks, contain rushes, and those sorts of things. So probably not Bossa as much, but Betcher and Jackson, they could come into play here as well. But I think Tysheem Johnson and Kobe Savage are the guys that pop into my head first and foremost that make me think, yeah, they've got to play well if Oregon's going to hit on this particular key to the game. So that's key number one. Key number two, win the rushing battle. Does this key sound familiar playing a high-level Big Ten team? It should. In the Michigan game, Oregon outran the Wolverines, won by 21 points. In the Ohio State game, Oregon outran just barely the Buckeyes and won. In 2021 against the Buckeyes, Oregon outran Ohio State and won the football game. That has consistently been a deciding factor when these high-level, top-of-the-Big Ten teams play high-profile games. Whoever is able to run for more yards. Who do you think ran for more yards, Michigan and Ohio State last Saturday? Pretty darn sure it was Michigan. I'll double check, but I would be pretty surprised if it was not the good old. That's the story on the fines and whatnot. Let's see, team stats. Here we go. Wait for it. Up 173-77. Michigan wins the football game. We heard that a lot coming into the Big Ten. You got to match the physicality. You got to be able to run the ball. You got to be able to do that. Well, Oregon's been able to do that. That's a big reason why they are 12-0. And Penn State is in the same category, though certainly a notch below Ohio State in past years because they've lost 8 straight to the Buckeyes. They haven't beaten Michigan in a long time either. But one of the reasons is they haven't been exceptional in the trenches. I think Penn State is a good team on both sides of the lines of scrimmage. I'll talk more about that for my third key to the game as well. But you look at these games and the team that's able to run for more yards, this is a twofold thought. On the one hand, I want to see Oregon run the ball against a run defense that isn't 14th in the Big Ten, not in the country, in the Big Ten. That's what Washington was, and I was thrilled. Absolutely thrilled with how Oregon ran the ball last week. They do that again. They do that in any game. I don't think Oregon will ever lose a football game when they run for 200 yards. There are other teams that can. But with the way this Oregon defense is and what that means for the offense, I cannot see a world where Oregon loses a game running for 200 yards. They don't have to do that per se in this particular matchup, but they do have to play well defensively and contain Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. Those two guys are incredibly capable. They are explosive. They are physical. They will break tackles. They are really good. They are as good of a running back tandem as exists in college football. I think that Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins at Ohio State are number one. These guys could be number two. I'd have to think through everybody in the country that's healthy, because Texas had a couple good backs, but they both got hurt. Like, these guys are top five. This is a top five running back tandem. You got to take them away. And that kind of goes back to the crux of key point number one. Make Drew Aller throw the ball outside the numbers and down the field. Make him do it. And make him do it to somebody that isn't Tyler Warren. So, who comes into play for winning the rushing attack? I think this is about the interior of the lines of scrimmage. Derek Harmon, Jamari Caldwell, Amari Washington, Jordan Birch have a big game. Control the line of scrimmage. Don't force Oregon to bring an extra safety down into the box or blitz guys more in order to stop the run game or contain it. Got to be able to win the matchup up front. And then conversely, I think it's about the interior of the offensive line. Poncho and Marcus Harper and Kavika Rogers and Nishad Strother, whatever combinations out there at any given time, got to be able to get movement. Got to be able to run the football, create lanes for Jordan James and Noah Whittington to run through. So I think the interior offensive line, defensive line are the guys that will most determine whether Oregon wins the rushing attack in this game. But if they do, I think they absolutely win the game. If there were, that could honestly be key number one, because I think if Oregon does that, they will win. If they don't stop Tyler Warren, they can still win. It might just be a little bit tougher. Key number three, last but certainly not least, no more than 2 sacks. This Oregon offensive line is one of the final 3 for the Joe Moore Award. Absolute studs. Dylan Gabriel deserves some credit for that as well, because he's got to get him in the right protections. He's got to get the ball out of his hands. He's got to not take sacks, not run himself into sacks like Caleb Williams has been known to do from time to time, and he hasn't. He's done a really good job. He has looked like the veteran quarterback we were hoping Oregon got in the offseason. I think he's done a great job in this particular area. This matchup, certainly the interior of the offensive line, it matters. But this will come down to Josh Connerly and a Johnny Cornelius. Can those two guys replicate the performance that they had against Ohio State and Michigan? 0 sacks allowed. Of the 8 starting defensive linemen between the Buckeyes and the Wolverines, they could have as many as 6 first-rounders. They have at least 4. At least 4. And guess what? There's a top 10 pick on the other side of the line of scrimmage. Abdul Carter is going to be no later, I think, than number 7 coming off of the NFL draft board in the spring. Maybe he can go and be a part of the Broncos defense and support our guy Bo Nix. But Connerly and Cornelius, Jeff Schwartz tweeted out after that Ohio State game that those two guys, with their performance there, made themselves some money. They could do it again right here. And Connerly was phenomenal against Washington this past week. If Josh and Johnny step up big in this game and Oregon allows no more than 2 sacks, which frankly would be more than we've come to expect, but if it's limited, if you don't let that Penn State defensive line control the game and pressure Dylan Gabriel, I trust Oregon's receivers in the passing game to be effective enough against a talented Penn State secondary. But if you give the quarterback time, there's not a lot that corners can do consistently. So those are my keys, my prediction. Yeah, I'll give it to you right now. Why not? I've got Oregon winning 27-17. This is a good Penn State defense. I think the Oregon offense will be just fine. Settle for a couple field goals, perhaps. Maybe Abdul Carter gets a sack to prevent Oregon from getting a touchdown here or there. But I trust the Oregon defense in this spot. Penn State did not manage an offensive touchdown against Ohio State. I think they will here. I do. But I don't think they're going to hit 20 points. So I'll go Oregon 27, Penn State 17. Drop your score predictions in the comments below.